Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Harris Bard from Panda Aquatics and Tropical Fish London, and in today's video, a look at Northwest London's biggest and best aquatic centre and all of the beautiful new species that we have in stock. Let's get into it. For those of you who are new here, we are Pond Life Aquatics and we do things a little bit differently than most fish rooms. We organise our fish house continent by continent, and the reason we do that is because it generally helps us organise things a little bit better, and it helps us to educate people on where their fish are from in the wild. And as a general rule, although not exclusively, different continents tend to have very similar water parameters, although there is diversity between them, but in general, it helps people set up biomes. But with that out of the way, when you first walk into our fish room, on the left-hand side, you have our South American species. And although we didn't get anything new in live bearers this week, we still have a decent selection of things like swordtails, guppies, platies, all those things you would expect. But the exciting new things we got in slightly further down. That's where we keep our Tetras species, our Pistogramma, and our Corydoras. And the two main types of Tetras that are noteworthy that we got in this week, every fish keeper's favorite kind of Tetra is the black neon Tetra. I feel like most people have kept black neons at some point if they're quite into the hobby. They need around a 75-litre tank for a sufficient shoal, but they are extraordinarily hardy as a fish. They're not nearly as susceptible to things like neon tetra disease as neon tetras are. Personally, I think they're extraordinarily striking. When you see them online, they are typically kept in these beautiful planted aquariums, and that is really the best way to do so. They come from slow-moving rivers that are usually quite tannin stained and heavily vegetated. So you want to try and replicate that inside of your aquarium to try and give them something more similar to their natural environment. And looking at neon tetras, they are just this absolutely beautiful silver streak that peeks out of this beautiful black sleek body. And they really are just this really impressive looking fish, particularly when kept well. But if you want something that's a little bit more poppy and a little bit rarer than your typical black neon, we got in one of my favorite species ever, and I used to actually breed this species, and that's the Bentosi tetra, or candy cane tetra, or white tip tetra. This species, again, realistically needs something like 75-litre, 80-litre aquarium to be kept well, and they love being kept in shoals. The ones we got in at the moment are quite juvenile, but as they get older, they're going to get these elongated dorsal fins. Particularly with the males and females, there is a slight sexual dimorphism. The females typically just keep that white tip with the reddish pink bodies, whereas the males, they have this really deep red to the body, going into more of a black-red dorsal fin, and then tipped with a beautiful white fin. You can see my older brother's helping me out with the filming, but it's cool. I love keeping Bentosi tetra. I think they're that little bit different from a lot of species you keep. I'd compare them probably to something like a Congo tetra in terms of their fin formation. They have those dramatic fins that you don't typically see on non-long fin morphs of tetras, and they just have this real nice elegance to them. They're relatively peaceful and can be kept with a lot of different tank mates. Personally, I kept them with Corydoras species and Otocinclus catfish, and they did absolutely wonderfully. They also really enjoy having some tannins in the water, so if you've ever thought about playing with a blackwater aquarium, Bentosis are going to really get on in a aquarium like that. Finally, in terms of tetra species, we got in Columbia tetras, which I know I talked about briefly in a previous video, but they sold extraordinarily well, and it's easy to see why. Again, another more robust tetra species from obviously South America and the South American section, but they do really, really well in heavily planted aquariums, as most tetra species do. These are a much more robust species of tetra. So if you've ever struggled with keeping more of your delicate species, I know a lot of people wouldn't say neon tetras are delicate, but in my experience, they are a lot more delicate than most other tetra species you're going to find in the trade. Columbia tetras are just an excellent, excellent choice. They're extraordinarily adaptable. They can go through a wide range of water parameters, you are just probably going to have a really good time with them, particularly if you're new to fish keeping. And personally, I think once they've colored up, they really are quite a striking fish. In terms of Corydoras catfish, we got in everyone's favorite diminutive cory, which is the Panda Corydoras. Now, this is a real bread and butter species that you're going to find in the trade. Pretty much every shop I've ever been into has Panda Corydoras, and if they don't, it's because they've sold out. Pandas are one of the smaller species of Corydoras. They love to be kept in shoals, as is the case with pretty much every species of Corydoras. So if you are thinking about keeping them, think about keeping them in a 50+ liter aquarium with at least 6 of them in a shoal to really show off those really playful, beautiful little behaviors. If you are looking at breeding Corydoras, which I am doing at home at the moment with my pygmies, one thing that you have to do with some of the more dainty species is you have to replicate a flood. A lot of Corydoras species are going to breed during the rainy seasons. So the way that you do this is you do a really heavy water change with colder water that has a low mineral content. You can do this in several ways. My personal favorite way is using RO water. That way I know that there aren't going to be any contaminants going into my aquarium at home. You can also do that with rainwater, which is what I used to do with my Bentosi Tetra back when I lived with my parents and didn't have access to a RO unit. But if you just want to enjoy Panda Corydoras, as most people do, keeping them in a sufficiently large group with a really good staple food, we use the Fish Science Corydoras tablet to make sure that they're well fed and happy is going to be the best way to keep them. And it's easy to see why people love pandas. They are just so cute and playful. And with those panda markings, everyone absolutely loves panda color morphs of fish. Although they are just their own species, they're not a species from human intervention. Over on the other side of South America, we haven't got anything new in, but I do just want to highlight how beautiful our hard water discus are at the moment. They're doing extraordinarily well. We did a bit of a tidy up in this aquarium. We had a little bit of blue-green algae issues in here, but we have just sorted them out now. Tank parameters are doing really well. I'm thinking about doing an update video on my FX6 video where I talk about how I found the FX6 over the past year, since it has been a year since we put out that video now, and just give you guys some of my thoughts on whether or not I think it's worth it as a filtration system. But overall, we're really happy with how these discus are getting on. Additionally, our angelfish are looking really happy and healthy at the moment. We've got a fair few different colors. We've got some koi angelfish in. We've got some traditional bicolors. I think we got one more of our avatar angels left. And then in terms of our dwarf parrotfish, we've had a lot of interest in them in the past few weeks, and the numbers are finally beginning to dwindle down. And we're thinking about breeding a few more batches of them, just because people do really love having them in their aquariums, although they realistically do need to be kept with only semi-aggressive species. But nothing new on this side of the aquarium, and overall we're just looking really happy and healthy in South America at the moment. Now moving down into Asia, we're looking really good in Asia at the moment. We've got some really interesting and beautiful species, and we've regularly been selling through a lot of the species that we have in. In terms of noteworthy things, we have these really fat and happy looking clown loach at the moment, which I know I've talked about previously where I've said that they need quite large aquariums, but we are starting to get more and more clientele that have large aquariums and want those kinds of things. So we are going to start stocking some more interesting, larger specimens, just so that people have something that they can stock in those bigger aquarium settings. But in terms of diminutive species in Asia, we got a restock of those Panda Loach that I was so excited about a few weeks ago. They absolutely just sold out completely when we got them in. And again, it's easy to see why. They're super, super interesting little loach species from China, where they live in these rivers systems. So they need lots of oxygen, lots of flow. And talking to a customer who's realistically a bit of a hobbyist when it comes to specifically Loach and Goby, he was saying how much better they get on when they're kept in larger groups. He took all of them when we first got them in, so we decided to get a restock, and he's probably going to be taking a few more of them which will lead a good selection for regular people from the public to be taking them home. He was saying how keeping them in bigger groups, particularly when they're young and they have that real panda look to them, as they get older, they will lose that real crispness to the lines on their bodies, but they still look quite striking when they're older. Keeping them in large groups will allow them to show off those really beautiful little loach-like behaviors. Realistically, they're just this beautiful little species that if you have been keeping fish for a little while and you're looking for something that's a little bit more challenging or a little bit rarer to keep, something like a panda loach is really going to do you well. Additionally, in terms of rarer and more interesting species in Asia, we got these red belt gobies in, which again, a bit more of a specialist species to keep. We've already sold a few of them off, but they are a true micro predator. Like most gobies, their mouths point more downwards, so you can tell that they're much more of a grubbing species. They're going to eat algae, detritus, all of these things that you're not going to need a front-facing mouth for. But these belt gobies actually have a slightly more pointed up mouth position, which indicates to us that they are a bit more of a micro predator. So you want to be feeding these guys a diversity of foods, whether or not you're going to be giving them a good staple of micro pellets. As long as you're supplementing that with things like frozen food and live food, you should really be able to get the best out of them. Again, with most goby species, you want to be keeping these guys in groups. Just because they are a sociable species, they will start to behave in those ways that you kind of want to see them behave, showing off those real beautiful poppy red colors along their bellies when they do start to mature a little bit more. And they are just something quite special to have inside of an aquarium, and definitely worthwhile setting up a dedicated goby tank for if you are looking to make that kind of riverscape situation going on. It's definitely something that I would look into doing in the future once I have enough room to have a dedicated river tank. These guys are just beautiful. I'm super excited to have them in. In terms of more common species, although I am going to go back to something relatively rare in the UK in a minute, we have these beautiful little honey gourami, and we tend to go for the golden honey gouramis here at Panda Aquatics just because they sell a lot better, and I personally think they are a lot more beautiful than your common honey gourami. Honey gouramis are perfect for something like a dirted aquarium, where you just want a small diminutive species to start feeding into an ecosystem. 40 liters or more is going to be ideal for something like honey gourami. They can be kept in groups and they will quite readily breed in captivity. Make sure they've got really dense vegetation to get those best behaviors out of them, and giving them a good mixture of foods, whether that be flake, pellet, live or frozen, is going to make them color up and just really look as beautiful as you want them to look. And then before I move on from this section, we do have something quite special that I want to highlight. We have these beautiful platinum Medaka. For those of you who don't know what Medaka are, they are Japanese rice fish, and they're quite difficult to get a hold of in the UK. We did have Kahaku Medaka for quite a long time, but then it just absolutely dried up. We could not get a hold of them for ages. Thankfully, a private breeder reached out to us, and we are now going to be regularly stocking our own bred Medaka rice fish, which I know is something that's super interesting to a lot of the people in our audience. So as of right now, we have these beautiful juvenile Medaka rice fish in. We did have some Gecko Medaka as well, which are that little bit rarer, a little bit more boisterous, bit bigger bodied, really easy to keep rice fish. Personally, I think they're really quite beautiful, but they've already completely sold out. We can also get some rarer species. I've got some blue Miyukis at home, so hopefully we're going to be having some rare species of Medaka in future. That being said, having platinums of this grade in is really quite something. If you're in the market for Medaka rice fish, please give us a call. We're more than happy for you to come down and take some of them home. And then down the end of the aquarium, we have our dedicated barb tanks. We got nothing in this top left tank, However, we still have the beautiful albinos and some longfins left. However, we just didn't think to restock this aquarium, and we probably will be doing that next week. But up here, we got some absolutely beautiful green tiger barbs. I don't feel like I need to talk about green tigers all that much. They need about 120 litres to be kept well. As I've said before, barbs are one of those really boisterous, nippy species that you realistically want to be having a dedicated barb tank, particularly for things like tiger barbs, if you want to go down that route. But in terms of new things in this tank here, although not typically Asian, they are from North America, we have some absolutely gorgeous rainbow shiners in stock. Now these guys typically come in quite small, and people tend to not be able to see why people love rainbow shiners so much. However, these guys have come in absolutely huge. A lot of the species we got in this week have come in quite big for what you would expect from a wholesaler, and these guys are just no exception. They are absolutely stunning. Now, rainbow shiners do require, I saw online, a minimum of 75 litres. However, I would suggest a 100-litre aquarium for them. They are a cold water species. They need lots of oxygen and lots of flow to keep them comfortable. Personally, if I was ever going to keep rainbow shiners, I would think about keeping them in either a dedicated aquarium just for rainbow shiners. They are definitely interesting enough to warrant that. Or I would be keeping them in a river species tank with lots of things like Danios and potentially some Hillstream Loach and Gobies. I'm really impressed with how these guys are looking, and hopefully they'll go to a good home. Again, they're one of those species that at some point I do want to do a deep dive into them, just because they are just fascinating. And they are one of those species that are so interesting to watch. But for now, I'm just so happy that we have them in store. Now, over on this side of Asia, we have a hell of a lot of different fighting fish in at the moment, and we have a really small selection of female fighting fish. But these guys are really, again, quite something. They are from a selection of places, but these guys are just doing absolutely wonderfully. I don't think they'll be here very long. If you have been waiting for us to get female fighters back in stock, then do come down this weekend or give us a call. Maybe we can reserve them for you, just because I don't know when we're going to be getting female fighters again for a while. But for now, super happy that we have these guys in. We still have some of our red-faced Danios that are doing really well. We have some Corydoras, and we've got a wide selection of different cherry shrimp, both in this room and in the quarantine space, which also doubles as a shrimp room at this point. But that's everything in Asia. Let's move on to Australia. Now, over in Australia, we got in some things that are absolutely beautiful. We got in some Pascai's rainbows, and I know we got Pascai's in before. However, these guys are from a different supplier and a different breeder. These Pascai's are absolutely huge. This is what you want from a Pascai's rainbow fish. They have those dramatic tails. They look absolutely stunning with those beautiful poppy blue eyes. Now, Pascai rainbow fish and a lot of pseudomogul species are going to be absolutely ideal for something like a 45-litre planted aquarium, or something like a shrimp tank that you want to add a few moving elements to in terms of fish. I absolutely adore pseudomogul rainbows, just because I think they are so interesting. I feel like online sometimes they get a rap for being a bit boring. Personally, I think that's from Australian people who are just bored to death of seeing pseudomoguls. However, in this country, it's a little bit rarer to see your pseudomogul species, particularly when you see them this well grown on. It's really quite rare for us to get in specimens like this, and it makes the Pascai's that we still have in stock in the tank above them look a little bit dull. That being said, I'm so excited that we have these guys in. It's really exciting that we're able to show off what pseudomoguls turn into when they are a bit bigger. And additionally, we got in some really nice Praecox rainbows, which are just your typical electric blue, beautiful, shiny rainbow fish. Again, they're one of those species that you see in a lot of places. If if you have rainbow fish in a store, they're typically going to be things like Bosmanis, Praycocks, all of those beautiful species. Super happy to have them in, but what really stands out to me in this section this week is the Pascais. And finally, in terms of fish, in Africa, we have some beautiful dwarf frogs in stock. We are just selling a hell of a lot of frogs at the moment, and they are just one of those species that have been a staple in the trade for so long. People always ask what they can be kept with and whether or not they can be kept safely in their tanks. Personally, I am of the opinion that you can keep frogs as long as you're keeping them a peaceful community fish, things like Oxycinchus, smaller Tetras species, things like Rasbora. But the best way to go about feeding them is spot feeding them. So defrost some bloodworm or some glassworm, and then literally put it in front of them in the tank, whether that be with your hands or tweezers. And that's going to be the best way to make sure they're fed. They don't have the best eyesight in the world, and realistically, to make sure that they can get to the food, because they aren't that quick, is going to be spot feeding them. And then you should be absolutely fine in keeping them in a community aquarium. So if you are okay with being a bit more involved in your feeding regime rather than just throwing in a bit of flake every day, then yes, keeping dwarf African frogs is going to be absolutely great. And then in terms of our plants, we're looking really well stocked at the moment. We've got an absolutely beautiful order in from Aquafleur this week, and we've got a diversity of different plants in, whether that be slightly easier to grow plants to some more challenging plant species. In terms of easy plants, things that I love recommending, things like Bacopa amplexus, Hygrophila polysperma, things like Amazon sword. And then in terms of harder to grow species, we have things like Altananthera recinae. We are thinking about starting to get in harder to grow species and having a CO2 dedicated tank for them. So if there are any species, particularly rare ones, that you're looking to get, let us know about that. But for now, we've got an absolutely beautiful selection, whether that be Deco series from Aquafleur, some really nice pieces of wood, lots and lots of plants so that you guys can get your aquariums planted up and looking beautiful. But in terms of stock, that's all we have. That's everything we have at Pond Life Aquatics this week. I do just want to say thank you to everyone who did vote for us in the Practical Fish Keepers Readers Poll. We'll find out the results of that at the end of this year. Fingers crossed we make it into the top 40. It's out of our hands now, but that is what it is. In terms of new content coming out, I'm going to be doing a Dirted Aquarium series to help promote a book that I was asked to contribute to. I'll be giving away some of those books, so keep an eye out for those videos. In terms of new content in the shop, we are actually looking at doing a podcast with a friend of the store and a friend of ours, who I won't mention just yet in case it doesn't happen, but we are going to be doing an in-depth series where we look at the science of all the different things surrounding aquaria. So if there's any specific subjects that you would like us to go over, then please let us know about that in the comments below. We will be back again next week for another stock video. We're already thinking about new things that we can get in, but I do just want to say thank you to everyone who's been supporting the store recently. It's been really amazing just to have the amount of people we have come through the shops, particularly on the weekends. It's really nice seeing some fresh faces. But for now, that's all from me here at Pond Life Aquatics, and I hope you'll join me again next time for this Pond Life.